the 7 invisible prisons of the mind. Think about where you spend your day to day. Not the physical places, the office, your home, the coffee shop. I'm talking about something deeper. Where did your mind actually live? What invisible room were you really inhabiting while your body went through the motions? Because here's what most people never realize. There are places in this world that exist only in your mind. They're not on any map. You can't find them by looking out a window. But they're more real, more powerful, and more dangerous than any physical location could ever be. And they're destroying you. Not quickly, not obviously, but slowly, quietly, like a photograph fading in sunlight. You feel exhausted for reasons you can't name, anxious about everything, hollow in ways you can't explain, and you blame yourself. You think something's broken inside you. But what if the problem isn't you? What if you're simply trapped in the wrong psychological space? I want to show you 7 invisible prisons that erase who you really are. They don't use force or violence. They do something far more insidious. They make you forget yourself. They teach you to abandon your own nature. They convince you the mask matters more than the face beneath it. The Hall of Mirrors. Imagine a room where every surface reflects back only what you already believe. Every conversation confirms your thoughts. Every opinion echoes your own. Every fear is validated by voices that sound remarkably like yours. Comfortable, right? That's exactly why it's so dangerous. The human mind isn't meant to live in perfect agreement with itself. It's designed to be challenged, tested, stretched. When you surround yourself only with people who think exactly as you do, something strange happens. Your mind doesn't grow stronger. It becomes rigid, brittle, afraid. I knew a man who only spent time with people who shared his exact worldview. Politics, religion, how to live properly. He thought he was being wise, but his capacity to think was shrinking every day. His world became smaller, more frightening, more dependent on the group to tell him what was real. The Hall of Mirrors makes you terrified of different ideas. A new thought feels like an attack. A different perspective feels like betrayal. You become so fused with your beliefs that questioning them feels like dying. But here's the truth. When you live in the Hall of Mirrors, you're not thinking. You're just repeating. You're not growing. You're calcifying. You're not becoming more yourself. You're becoming less. The way out? Deliberately seek voices that disturb you. Not to argue, not to prove them wrong, but to feel your mind stretch. To remember what it's like to wonder, to question, to not know. The arena of comparison. This is where you measure your worth against everyone else's highlight reel. Their achievements, their status, their carefully curated lives. Here, nothing you do is ever quite enough because someone, somewhere, has always done it better. The arena disguises itself as motivation. We think comparing ourselves to others will inspire us to improve. But watch what actually happens. You don't become inspired, you become exhausted. I remember a woman who got the promotion she'd worked toward for years. Instead of joy, all she felt was inadequacy because a colleague got promoted even higher. Her accomplishment meant nothing. Someone else had accomplished more. She'd given away her power to feel satisfied with her own life. The arena treats life like a race with a single finish line, as if there's some cosmic scoreboard ranking all of humanity. But this is absurd. Your life isn't comparable to anyone else's. You're not competing with the rest of humanity. You're on your own path, playing your own game. When you live here, you stop pursuing what brings you joy and start chasing what brings recognition. You stop listening to your desires and start performing for an imaginary audience. You become so busy keeping score that you forget to actually live. The escape requires something radical. Stop measuring altogether, not occasionally, completely. Learn to do things because they delight you, not because they'll impress anyone. Recover the ability to play without keeping score, to create without needing applause, to exist without calculating your rank. The theater of masks. This is where authenticity is punished and performance is rewarded. Here you show only the parts of yourself that are acceptable, impressive, useful. Everything else hides behind a carefully constructed facade. We all wear masks sometimes. This is natural, even necessary. But the theater of masks is different. Here, the mask becomes so thick, so permanent, that you forget there was ever a face beneath it. I knew a man who worked where showing weakness meant career death. He learned to laugh at unfunny jokes, to agree with ideas he opposed, to hide every part of himself that didn't fit the approved image. After years of this performance, something terrifying happened. He no longer knew who he really was. The mask had become his only identity. This is what the theater does. It doesn't just hide your true self, it erases it, slowly, imperceptibly, until you reach for yourself and find nothing there. You've become a hollow performance, a costume with no one inside. The exhaustion is relentless. Every interaction requires careful calculation. What can I say? What must I hide? How should I appear? You come home drained, not from genuine engagement, but from the constant effort of being someone you're not. Here's the cruel irony. The very thing you're trying to achieve through performance, connection, belonging, acceptance, can only be found through authenticity. The performance creates exactly the isolation it's trying to avoid. The way out requires courage. You must start taking off the mask. Carefully at first, testing who stays and who leaves. Yes, some will leave, those who preferred your performance. But this isn't loss. This is liberation. The people who remain will be in relationship with you, not your costume. The room of silence, not peaceful silence, not contemplative stillness. This is toxic silence where pain is buried, needs are denied, and truth is too dangerous to speak. Many grew up in families like this. Everything looked fine on the surface. No screaming, no obvious dysfunction. But beneath the pleasant facade, everyone was slowly suffocating. Feelings weren't expressed. Problems weren't addressed. The unspoken rule was simple. Don't rock the boat. In the room of silence, you learn that having emotional needs is selfish. That expressing pain is weakness. That peace means never being honest about what hurts. You become skilled at suffering quietly, at pretending everything's fine, at convincing yourself numbness equals peace. But your emotional needs don't disappear when you ignore them. They accumulate in your body, creating anxiety you can't explain, and depression that seems to come from nowhere. You feel lonely, even surrounded by family because no one really sees you. I knew a family that prided itself on never fighting. They thought this meant they were close, but individually, each person felt desperately alone. The mother was depressed but couldn't say so. The father was overwhelmed but had no one to tell. The children learned their feelings were inconvenient disruptions. The room of silence teaches you to cope with pain rather than heal from it. It trains you to ask, how can I tolerate this better? Rather than, how can I address what's wrong? The way out requires breaking the silence, gently but firmly. Saying out loud what's been hidden. Not with anger or blame, but with simple honesty. I'm hurting. I need help. This isn't working. It means risking false peace for the possibility of real connection. The storm of noise. This is the opposite of toxic silence. Here you're constantly bombarded with information, stimulation, demands, distractions. There's always something to read, watch, consume. You fill every quiet moment because stillness feels unbearable. This place existed long before smartphones. It's anywhere you use external noise to avoid internal truth. Reading obsessively to avoid thinking about your marriage. Staying endlessly busy to escape your own company. Filling your mind with others' problems so you don't face your own. The storm is seductive because it feels productive. You're staying informed, staying busy, staying engaged. But watch what happens to your mind here. You consume enormous amounts of information, but retain almost none. You have opinions about everything, but deep understanding of nothing. You're exhausted from constant mental activity, but can't point to anything you've actually accomplished. I knew a man who read 3 newspapers every morning and spent evenings discussing current events. He prided himself on being well informed. But when I asked what he truly understood, what wisdom he'd gained, he had nothing to say. He'd been filling his mind with noise to avoid the silence where real thinking happens. The storm keeps you in constant reaction. You're always responding to the latest crisis, the newest outrage. There's no time for contemplation, for integration, for letting experiences settle into understanding. Without that settling, nothing actually becomes part of you. It just passes through, leaving you feeling full, but somehow still empty. The way out is frightening because it requires turning off the noise. At first, anxiety floods in. All the things you've been avoiding rush to the surface. But if you stay with the discomfort, something remarkable happens. Your mind begins to clear. Your thoughts become your own again. You hear that quiet inner voice the storm had drowned, the Chamber of Self-Betrayal. This is where you systematically abandon your own truth, your needs, your instincts. It happens so gradually, you don't even notice. You say yes when everything inside screams no. You stay in draining situations because leaving feels too difficult. You choose what's expected over what's authentic, what's safe over what's true. Here, you become skilled at ignoring yourself. Someone asks what you want, and you genuinely don't know, because you've spent so long considering only what others want, what seems practical, what will avoid conflict. Your gut instincts become faint whispers you've learned to disregard. I knew a woman who spent 20 years in a career she didn't care about, married to a man she didn't love, living in a city that depressed her. When I asked why, she said it made sense. Her family approved. The job was secure. The marriage was stable. She'd built her entire life on what seemed reasonable to everyone else while completely ignoring what felt right to her. The chamber convinces you that maturity means ignoring your desires, that responsibility means betraying your truth, that being good means abandoning yourself. So you make 1,000 small compromises, each barely noticeable, until you wake up one day living someone else's life entirely. The cruelest part is that society often rewards self-betrayal. You're called mature when you ignore your needs, responsible when you sacrifice your happiness, selfless when you put everyone else first. But this isn't virtue. This is slow spiritual death. The way out requires something that may feel selfish at first. You must begin checking in with yourself again. What do I actually want? What does this feel like in my body? What is my truth, regardless of what others expect? And then, most frightening of all, you must start making choices based on these answers. Some people will be disappointed. This is inevitable. But your life belongs to you, not to their expectations. The basement of shadows. This is the internal space where you've locked away all the parts of yourself you're too afraid or ashamed to face. Every painful memory, every shameful thought, every quality you've decided is unacceptable. Down into the basement they go. You might think this sounds smart. Push down the bad stuff and focus on being good. But what you bury doesn't stay buried. It grows stronger in the darkness, influencing your behavior in ways you don't understand. You find yourself overreacting to small things, sabotaging your own success, repeating patterns you swore you'd never repeat, and you can't figure out why, because the real cause is locked in the basement. I knew a man who despised his father's anger and swore he'd never be like that. He prided himself on being calm and controlled. But then he had children, and to his horror, he found himself raging at them over tiny things. He'd locked his own anger in the basement, thinking he'd eliminated it. But it had simply been waiting in the dark, gathering strength, until it burst out in exactly the way he feared. Every quality you reject doesn't disappear. It goes underground and starts running your life from the unconscious. You judge others harshly for traits you secretly fear in yourself. You attract situations that force you to confront what you've been avoiding. But here's the remarkable thing. The shadow basement doesn't just contain what you fear. It also holds tremendous power, creativity, and vitality. That buried anger might become passionate advocacy once you face it. That sadness might become deep empathy. That shame might become fierce compassion. The way out requires descent. Not avoidance, not denial, but the courage to go into the darkness with a light and see what's actually there. Not to judge it, not to fight it, but simply to acknowledge it. Yes, this is also part of me. And in that acknowledgement, the shadow loses its power to control you unconsciously. You become whole again, integrated, no longer at war with yourself. The way out, 7 invisible prisons. The hall of mirrors that makes you rigid and afraid. The arena of comparison that makes your achievements meaningless. The theater of masks that erases your authentic face. The room of silence that buries your truth. The storm of noise that drowns your inner voice. The chamber of self-betrayal, where you abandon yourself. And the basement of shadows, where you hide from your wholeness. Recognizing these places is only the beginning. How do you leave? The answer is both simple and terrifying. You must become conscious. Look honestly at where you are. Not where you pretend to be, not where you wish you were, but where you actually spend your psychological time. Which of these places do you inhabit daily? Then you must begin to leave. Not all at once, not dramatically, but deliberately. Limit your time in toxic environments. Set boundaries with people who demand your mask. Create space for silence where your inner voice can speak. Make small choices based on your truth rather than external expectations. Begin the slow work of integrating what you've hidden. This won't make you popular. People comfortable in these places will feel threatened. They'll call you selfish for setting boundaries, weird for being authentic, antisocial for needing silence, irresponsible for following your truth. Let them. Your freedom is worth their discomfort. When you leave these places, you don't just feel better, you become different. Your relationships deepen because they're based on truth. Your work becomes meaningful because it comes from your authentic self. Your mind clears. You feel alive again because you've stopped abandoning yourself. But perhaps most importantly, you give others permission to leave too. When you stop participating in these toxic patterns, you create an opening for others to escape. Your family might begin speaking truth. Your friends might remove their masks, not because you preached at them, but because you showed them another way is possible. These places persist because we collectively agree to inhabit them. But when enough individuals choose freedom, the whole system shifts. One person's liberation creates ripples far beyond what you can see. So ask yourself, which of these places have you called home? Where are you spending your psychological energy? What would it take to leave? Here's the beautiful truth. You are not stuck. These places have no walls except the ones you believe in. The hall of mirrors? Walk toward a different voice. The arena of comparison? Stop keeping score. The theater of masks? Take off the costume, the room of silence, speak your truth, the storm of noise, turn it off, the chamber of self-betrayal. Choose yourself, the basement of shadows. Descend with curiosity instead of fear. Your true self isn't destroyed. It's simply been buried under layers of accommodation, performance, and fear. But it's still there, waiting patiently for you to remember who you actually are. The meaning of your life isn't to successfully navigate these prisons. It's to recognize them, leave them, and discover what remains when you're no longer defending, performing, or hiding. What remains is you, the real you, the one who was always there, watching, waiting, ready to live again. When you find that self, you'll wonder how you ever mistook these prisons for homes. You'll see clearly that freedom was always available, always just one honest choice away. The door was never locked. You were simply afraid to open it. The 7 invisible prisons exist, yes, but so does the way out. And the way out begins with seeing where you are, admitting it honestly, and taking one small step toward truth. Not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect, but now. Always now. This is your invitation. Not to perfection, not to some distant achievement, but to the simple act of coming home to yourself, to living from your center instead of from fear, to playing your own music instead of dancing to someone else's tune. The prisons will always be there, offering their false comforts and familiar walls. But you don't have to accept the invitation. You can choose differently. You can walk out of the hall of mirrors and into genuine conversation. You can leave the arena and pursue what brings you joy. You can remove the mask and risk being seen. You can break the silence and speak your truth. You can turn off the noise and listen to yourself. You can stop betraying yourself and start honoring your own knowing. You can descend into the basement and integrate your shadows. This isn't easy work, but it's the only work that matters. Because what good is a life spent in these prisons? What's the point of surviving if you've lost yourself in the process? Your true self is calling. Not from some distant future, but from right here, right now, beneath all the layers of protection and performance. It's been waiting for you to remember, waiting for you to come home. The question is, will you answer?